We just completed a discussion on the importance of providing navigation in your website. We also looked at several different ways that we can provide navigation in a website. It's now time for us to look at Bootstrap and look at the components that Bootstrap provides that enable us to add navigation to our websites. Two important components from Bootstrap is the navbar and breadcrumbs. We're going to examine both of these in this exercise. Let's get started by adding a navigation bar to the top of our web page. We can do that using the navbar component that is part of Bootstrap. So how do we get started? We go to the body of our HTML page. So here I have index.html open, and at the top I'm going to add in an element using the nav HTML tag. Now the nav HTML tag is intended for providing navigation, so let's take the advantage of this tag and build our navigation bar using the nav tag. So at the top I'm going to add in this tag with the nav and construct the navigation bar around this nav tag. So once we add this nav tag into index.html, then we can go ahead and then apply the Bootstrap's classes to this nav tag. So I apply the class navbar. So the navbar class in Bootstrap allows me to create a navigation bar. There are many different ways of customizing the navigation bar, which we will look at as additional classes that we will add to this nav tag. Along with the navbar, we also add in the next class, which is navbar dark. Now I want my navigation bar to be dark in color with a darker background because that goes very well with the website that I have just designed. We can have navbar light, which is a lighter colored navigation bar. So you can choose to use either one of them in your web page. The next class that I'm going to use is navbar expand SM class. Now, and also I will specify the screen size below which the toggleable behavior comes into existence. Now, when I say navbar expand SM, that means that for small and extra small screens, this navbar will become a toggleable navbar, meaning that it will be collapsed in those screen sizes. You will pretty soon learn how this works when we look at how we can add the collapse plugin to the navbar to enable that kind of behavior. So along with the navbar toggleable SM, I'm going to apply a background color to the navbar initially, which would be BG primary. Now BG primary is the primary color that is defined in your Bootstrap. By default, this is a version of blue color that is used by Bootstrap. So I'm going to start with that as my primary color. Later on, I will customize my navbar's color using some CSS classes. In addition, I am also going to apply another class called as fixed top to the navigation bar. What fixed top does is it fixes the navigation bar to the top of the browser window where this web page is being rendered. Even when you scroll your web page, the navigation bar will still remain at the top of the page. You can simply use fixed bottom to fix the navigation bar to the bottom of your browser window, or you can say static top, and also you can just not use this class. If you don't use that, then your navigation bar will also scroll when your web page is scrolled upwards. In my website, I choose to keep the navigation bar fixed at the top of the page. There are many other options that are available, which you can find in the Bootstrap's documentation. So this is one example of the use of the navigation bar. Now, in addition, inside the navigation bar, I'm going to enclose whatever content is going to be used in the navigation bar inside a container. So this is where I will use a div element here and apply the container class to this div element. So whatever is enclosed inside there will be restricted to the same width as the rest of my web page. As you recall, I use the container class to define the width of the content in my web page. So I'm going to apply the same to my navigation bar also, so that my navigation bar information will be displayed within the same width as the rest of my web page. You can choose not to use the container class in the navigation bar, in which case the contents of the navigation bar will spread over the entire width of your screen. Inside the navigation bar, I'm going to add in a class to an A tag here. This class, which I call as navbar brand, allows me to display some information as a branding information in my navigation bar. So if you have a company, for example, you can display the name of your company or the logo of your company using the navbar brand, so that will be prominently displayed in your navigation bar. Obviously, when you visit many websites, you would see that the name of the company is somewhere visible in the navigation bar of that website. So let me add in that navbar brand. This can also be hyperlinked to the home page of your website. So I'm going to leave that there. In the remaining pages of my website, I will set the href to bring me back to the index.html page, which is the home page. And inside here, I'm going to add in the name of my restaurant. Let's save the changes and go and have a quick look at the current state of my navigation bar. Going to the web page in the browser, you can now see where my navigation bar is visible on my web page in the browser. The navigation bar is now at the top of the page, and you can see that as I scroll my page, the navigation bar still remains at the top because I use the fixed top class. You can also see the navbar brand allowing me to display the name of the restaurant there. Later on, I'm going to replace that with the logo for this restaurant. You do notice that the navigation bar is partly covering the Jumbotron. We're going to fix that a little bit later using some CSS customization. The next thing that I'm going to do is to add in a few links to my navigation bar, so that these links will lead me to the other pages in my website. So how do we do that? Going back to index.html, I'm going to add in a UL here, within which I'm going to declare all the various links that are going to be displayed in my navigation bar. So this UL, to which I'm going to apply the class as navbar_nav. So this is the class that will help me to define the set of links that will be included in my navigation bar. And these links will be displayed horizontally inside my navigation bar. The mrAuto class that I have also applied to the UL is used to specify the right margin. So this is a utility class that is available in Bootstrap that allows me to specify the right margin. So if I say mr-auto, what it means is that on the right side, the right margin should be set as much as possible. So which means that the content will be pushed as left as possible within the navigation bar there. Inside this unordered list, I can use list elements to include the various links that are going to be part of my navigation bar. So in there, I'm going to add in a few links there, and I will start out by specifying the first one there with the link. To every list item in your navigation bar, you're going to apply the class as navItem. This allows these list items to be displayed horizontally as links in my navigation bar. And then inside here, I can then use the A tag to add in the actual link that will be part of my navigation bar. So inside there, I use the A tag with the class nav link. And this also allows me to use the href attribute to define the link there. And the first one that I'm going to include is home. So this would include an item called home in this navigation bar. Let me just copy that and then paste that, and then we will edit some of these because I want to add 4 different ones to my navigation bar. The first one is home, the second one would be about, the third one would be menu, which I'm going to build as part of the next course, and the last one will be contact. A typical company website would have links like this in its navigation bar. So with adding these two, now what I can do is that we can explicitly identify one of these links as the active link, meaning that when you are on that particular page, that particular link can be highlighted. So to do that, we will apply another class called active to one of these list items. In this case, since this is the index.html page, I am applying the active class to the home link there. This pretty much completes my navigation bar in the index.html page. One little thing that I would like to fix here is that the about link, I want to link it to the aboutus.html page that we have already included into our website, because that is where I want it to lead. Let's go and take a quick look at our navigation bar at this point. Coming back to our navigation bar, you can immediately see the result of including those items into the unordered list there. So you see the home, about, menu, and contact there, and each of them is a link, but this is a navigation item, nav item here. And note how the home is highlighted here because of the use of the active class. So if I click on the about, it should take me to the about page. Lo and behold, there we are. But I do realize that I don't have a way of going back. So which means that I also need to add this navigation bar to the aboutus.html page. We'll get there in a short while. For now, I'm going to quickly navigate using the back button of my browser back to my index.html page. One thing that I also wanted to demonstrate to you was how this navigation bar will collapse for small and extra small screen sizes. So let's turn on the view using the responsive view, and then let me go to the Galaxy S5, and I notice that when I use the Galaxy S5 like this, you can see that this is being displayed and then it is already covering the screen there. That is not the behavior that I want. I want to be able to hide this when I am viewing this on a small and extra small screen, and then perhaps add a button here which I can use to toggle on and off the display of these links. You have seen such things in mobile websites. How do we do this in Bootstrap? Let's go to that step next. Going back to our navigation bar here, let me add in a button there which will act as the toggle button for showing and hiding my links from my navigation bar when it is displayed on extra small and small screens. So to add there, let me add in a button and apply some classes to this button. We're going to discuss more about buttons in Bootstrap in the next lesson, but to add a button in Bootstrap, you would apply the class for this particular button as navbar toggler. So this is a navbar toggler. So as the name implies, you are already beginning to understand what this button is going to do in this case. And then I would add the type as button to indicate that this is acting as a button, and then data toggle as collapse. Now this data toggle attribute that you see here is actually a JavaScript component usage in Bootstrap. We're going to look at this data-star kind of attributes more in the next module, where we will look at Bootstrap's JavaScript components. The navbar requires one of those JavaScript components to be able to toggle on and off my links in my navigation bar. So that's the reason why I quickly introduced this concept here, but we'll come back to examine this Bootstrap's JavaScript components more in the next module. So data toggle collapse, and then the data target as hash nav bar. Now I'm going to introduce another div with the ID as nav bar. So when I specify a data target hash nav bar, that refers to the ID of that other element, which is going to be the target of this particular button here. So that's the part that I add in to the button. And also I want the button to display something here. And it typically, when you see these kind of buttons in mobile websites, it would contain 3 lines there, so which is typically called as the navbar toggler icon. So I'm going to include a special icon that is included in Bootstrap called as navbar toggler icon. So if I apply this class to a span tag, then that will introduce a navbar toggler icon to my button there. So that introduces a button. We're going to look at what this looks like in a short while. Now, when I click this button, I want to be able to show and hide these links. To enable me to do that, what I'm going to do is to surround this UL with a div here. So I'm going to come in and introduce a div around this UL. And to this div, I will apply the class as collapse, and then navbar collapse, and then I give it an ID as navbar. Now you're beginning to see the correlation between these classes and the ID and what I declared in the data toggle and the data target. So here the data target I specify as hash navbar, and so the ID given to this div is navbar. And I specify the data toggle as collapse. Collapse is one of the Bootstrap's JavaScript components, which we will look at in more detail in the next module. So enclosing this inside the div, for small and extra small screens, this would be hidden by default, but when I click on the button, the contents of this div will be revealed on the screen. Let me also add an MR auto to the A class navbar brand there, so that I automatically introduce a right margin, sufficient right margin to this navbar brand. Now let's go and take a look at this in our browser. Going to the browser, you can now see how my navbar is collapsed on small and extra small screen sizes. And notice this button on the left side. When I click on that button, the links in my navigation bar are displayed and hidden. This is the behavior that I want for responsive implementation of my navigation bar. If I switch to a normal large screen, the navigation bar is completely displayed, including the links. But when I view the same thing on a smaller screen like this, then the navigation bar's links are hidden behind this button and then will be toggled on and off by clicking on that button. So that is the responsive behavior that you can build into your navigation bar on your website. Now that we have completed the navigation bar on my index.html page, I want to be able to introduce the same navigation bar to the about us.html page. Before we get there, let's go to the footer here, and then you notice that in the footer we have these links. I want to be able to update this link also to point to about us.html, so that even by clicking the link in my footer, I would still go to the about page. Now, going back up here, what I am going to do is simply copy this code of this navigation bar from here, and then go to about us.html page and then paste that into my about us.html page. Not just that, I need to do some adjustment to this because this is now in the about us.html page. So obviously there are a few things that I need to update. First and foremost, this navbar brand, which should lead me back to my home page, should now be updated as index.html here. And then the list item here now, the second one, the home page, again, I want to update that to index.html there. And then the second link to the about, because this is the about us.html page, I'm going to put it back to the hash there. And then I will remove the active class from the first item and then apply the active class to the second item, because this is the about page, and so that should be the one that is highlighted. Again, going to the footer of the about page, in the footer I will do the same updates to the links here. So the home page should lead me back to index.html, and then let me save the changes. So now my about page is also updated correctly. Going to the browser, you can now see that I am on my home page, and then when I click on the about page, I will go to the about page. Note how the same navigation bar is displayed in the about page. So you have the about being highlighted because I applied the active class to that, and then I can go back to my home page either by clicking on the navbar brand or the home. So let's click on the navbar brand, and we are back in our main or home page or index.html. So now the navigation is correctly set up both in the home page and in the about page. Couple of additional things that I'm going to do is to apply a few CSS classes that I can change my navbar's color, and also I would like to add a breadcrumb to this about page, and so that the breadcrumb will also give me another way of navigating back to my home page, and also will indicate the hierarchy in my website where I am at the moment. So let's do those two steps next. Going back to the editor, in styles.css, I'm going to add in a couple of more classes here. You notice that my navbar was hiding part of the Jumbotron. In order to avoid that, what I'm going to do is to my body, I'm going to give a padding of 50 pixels on the top, so that those 50 pixels will be left for the navigation bar to cover. Whenever you're using a fixed top navigation bar, it's a good idea to give this padding to the body of your web page so that the navigation bar doesn't cover the topmost element in the body of your web page. So the remaining ones I'm going to leave as 0 pixel, and also the z index for my body as 0. From your knowledge of CSS, you understand what the z index does. And the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to overload navbar dark class by adding in one more color for the navbar class, and the color that I'm going to choose is 51 2DA8. This is a dark purple color, which looks very good in my website. Indeed, if you have interest where I found these colors, you can visit developer.android.com and then look up the documentation for material design, and there they have suggestions for how colors can be used in your Android application. But the same thing applies even to a website. So that is where I went and selected these colors to be used in my website. So applying these. Now, when I do this, I have to go back to my index.html page, and then from the nav bar, I should remove this BG primary. Otherwise, the color that I suggested in the CSS will not be applied to this. Similarly, go to the aboutus.html page and then scroll to the nav bar and then remove the BG primary from that also. Now, while I am in aboutus.html page, let me introduce a breadcrumb into my container, the first row of my container there. So this is where the About Us title was there. So there I'm going to go in and then introduce an OL. I'm just using the OL tag as a way of introducing the breadcrumb. You can use even a div for this and it'll still work just fine. It just so happens that the example on Bootstrap's documentation used an OL, so I'm sticking with that. Even a simple div will also work fine here. I say OL class call 12 breadcrumb. So the breadcrumb class is applied, and note the call 12, meaning that stretch the entire screen. And inside there, I'm going to go in and add 2 list items. Now you see why the use of OL is useful here, because I can use the list items to describe the breadcrumb item. So breadcrumb item here. So I include one breadcrumb item, and then inside there I will use the A tag to define a link back to my home page. So I say A, and then to this A I give the href as .index.html, and then include that into my first breadcrumb. And then after this, the next one that I'm going to include is another list item. And the second list item, I will apply the class as breadcrumb item and active. So note the use of the active class here. And then inside there, I would say about us. I don't need a link here because I'm already on the page, so that doesn't need to be included for this list item. Let's save the changes. So you can see how the breadcrumb has been introduced into this particular About Us page here. Let's go and take a look at the resulting web page. Going to my web page, you can now see that the color of the nav bar has now changed to the dark purple, which I introduced through the CSS, and this looks nice on the screen here. Dark purple followed by a lighter purple, and then at the bottom even more lighter purple for my footer. Well, I am no designer, but this is the best that I could come up with in terms of adding colors to websites. As you know from history, men are colorblind. So we have very poor taste in colors. If you're married, your wife will definitely remind you about it. Let's go to the About page and see what it looks like. So this is the About page. And in the About page, you can see the nav bar with the correct color there. And note the breadcrumb included in the About Us down here. So you can see the home, which leads you back to the index page, and then the About Us. As you saw, we applied the active class to this one. So that's how the About Us is displayed and the home page. So this is the default breadcrumb style used in Bootstrap. And if I click on the home page, I'll be back to my home page. With this, we complete this exercise on navbar and breadcrumbs. This is a good time for you to do a git commit with the message navbar and breadcrumbs.